The problem Trump faces is that he just made a massive blunder by attacking Iran. It's a losing war. It'll undoubtedly go down as the greatest strategic disaster in American military history, outdoing even the Iraq War. And he's going to have a devil of a time getting out of this war. It's not like he can just snap his finger and end it. And I would surmise, Danny, that what's going to happen here over the next couple months is that he's going to be faced with two losing wars. He's going to be seen, or we're going to be seen to have lost to Russia in Ukraine. And we're going to be seen to have lost to Iran in the Middle East.
John Mearsheimer is making an extraordinary argument. America may be approaching the limits of its ability to sustain several major military commitments at the same time. His conclusion remains fiercely contested, but the pressure behind it is real. The war with Iran has consumed a substantial portion of America's most advanced missile interceptors, while Ukraine continues to compete for many of the same limited weapons. At the same time, Washington still identifies China as its primary long-term military challenge. That creates a question with consequences far beyond the battlefield. What happens when American commitments begin expanding faster than the industrial capacity supporting them? This affects deterrence in Europe and Asia, but can also affect oil prices, inflation, federal spending, and American taxpayers. To understand the risk, we first need to examine why Mearsheimer believes Iran now holds greater negotiating leverage.
What we want to do, apparently, is go back to the Memorandum of Understanding. There are some reports on the internet that the administration, the Trump administration, has approached the Iranian government about going back to the Memorandum of Understanding. The problem is we're not going to go back to the Memorandum of Understanding because the Iranians are going to drive a harder deal in terms of reaching any new memorandum. They're not going to be willing to go back to the 17th of June memorandum as it stands. They'll want a better deal, and they'll want a better deal because their situation today is better than it was in the run-up to the June 17th deal. In other words, what happened is we violated the June 17th deal. We got into this tit-for-tat campaign, and it didn't produce victory in any sense of that term. And in fact, we basically opted to end the tit-for-tat campaign because we could no longer carry it on given the weapons shortages that we have. The last thing we need is to continue the fighting given our shortage of weaponry. So the end result is we are really in an extremely difficult position at this point in time. The Iranians don't trust us, and they're going to drive a much harder bargain this time around.
In plain English, Mearsheimer believes the balance of leverage has moved against Washington. That does not mean Iran has won or that the United States lacks military power. It means military power and negotiating leverage are not always the same thing. A country can destroy targets, yet still struggle to obtain the political settlement it wants, particularly when its opponent can continue disrupting shipping, threatening regional bases, or raising the economic cost of continued fighting. There is also a factual complication. The transcript repeatedly refers to a June 17th memorandum, while the U.S. Energy Information Administration dates the agreement that reopened the Strait of Hormuz to June 18th. The exact terms and subsequent alleged violations, therefore, should not be described as independently established without the underlying document. But Mearsheimer's broader question remains important. Has Iran survived long enough to make further escalation more expensive than negotiation? The answer depends heavily on one resource that Washington rarely discusses publicly. How many advanced missiles remain available?
Of course. I mean, this is poppycock. Right. First of all, it looks like we have expended, according to almost all reports, virtually all of our ATACMS and PRISMs, 50% of our Tomahawks. Then if you look at our inventory of THAADs, we've expended 80% of our THAADs and 65% of our Patriot interceptors. This is truly remarkable. And there are all sorts of reports in a variety of media outlets that Trump reamed Pete Hegseth out at a meeting this past Friday for failing to tell him that we had decimated the inventory to the levels I just described. This just shows you that Trump is fully aware of the problem that we face. Now, he says we can replace these weapons. He's living in a dream world. We don't have that industrial base, as we were talking about before. It takes years to replace. It's going to take years to replace all these missiles. So we are in deep trouble. And this is one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that he did not attack this past Friday, despite the fact that he said he was going to attack. We don't have the weapons. And if you want to, you just also want to think about what attacking would look like. We would attack, it would be a massive attack, he says. And anytime you hear the word massive, that means you're going to use up a lot of missiles and a lot of bombs. And we just said we don't have a lot of missiles and we don't even have a lot of bombs, okay? And furthermore, the Iranians are not going to throw up their hands right away. So this massive offensive is going to turn into a protracted offensive. And you remember the first offensive, the 40-day war? Think of that, 40 days. Apparently there were about 13,000 targets that we went after. Iran is a target-rich environment, fighting a massive war over a protracted period of time when you don't have many weapons to begin with. I want to know how that one works. Well, we got deeply committed to supporting Ukraine in its war against Russia. And as I described to you before, if you look at Russia's assets for attacking Ukraine, you see that they have lots of ballistic missiles, lots of cruise missiles, lots of drones, and they have lots of smart bombs. And therefore, Ukraine is going to need huge amounts of defensive weapons if it's going to try to protect itself against that Russian arsenal of attacking missiles, drones, and bombs. And Ukraine certainly doesn't have the capability to build those defenses. And we have lots of defensive weapons in the West, in Europe, and in the United States. So what Ukraine became was a giant vortex that sucked up all these defensive weapons out of the West. The war that started on February 28th, which is used up another vast number of defensive missiles. As I said before, we have used up 80% of our THAADs, and we have used up 65% of our Patriots. That's roughly the number that Colonel Hamilton used. This is truly amazing. 65% of our Patriots gone. 80% of our THAADs gone. And as I said before, and you know very well, replacing these is going to be extremely difficult. So we in the West, whether you're talking about the Europeans or the Americans, don't have a whole heck of a lot of defensive missiles. And by the way, this has consequences not only for Europe and not only for the Middle East, but also for East Asia. China is supposed to be the pacing threat for the United States, according to the Pentagon. We were supposed to pivot to Asia. So one would think that not having all these defensive missiles and offensive missiles like the Tomahawks, the ATACMS, and the PRISMs is really going to matter out there. And it is going to matter out there. And that's why I was saying before, it's hardly surprising that now they're talking about emphasizing nuclear deterrence over conventional deterrence.
The available evidence supports Mearsheimer's central concern, but not every number he uses. A July 27th, 2026 analysis from the Center for Strategic and International Studies estimated that fewer than 1,000 Patriot interceptors and approximately 250 THAAD interceptors remained. Its estimates suggested Patriot inventories had fallen approximately 65%, but THAAD inventories had declined around 38%, not the 80% claimed in this interview. Because the Pentagon does not publish complete operational inventories, these remain informed estimates rather than official counts. Size analysis. Reuters separately reported on August 4th that U.S. forces had used virtually all available long-range ATACMS and precision strike missiles assigned to the Iran campaign, nearly half of the Navy's Tomahawks, and significant portions of other critical inventories. That report relied on knowledgeable sources, not publicly released Pentagon totals. Production is increasing. In April, Defense Department officials said fiscal year 2026 plans included $31.8 billion for critical land-based missiles, including Patriot, THAAD, and precision strike missile procurement. But placing an order is not the same as immediately receiving combat-ready missiles. Specialized components, testing, and limited production lines make rapid replacement difficult. U.S. Department of Defense. For American households, the most visible consequence has been energy. The EIA forecasts Brent crude averaging approximately $85 per barrel during the third quarter of 2026 as reduced traffic through the Strait of Hormuz limit supply. July inflation was 3.4% year over year, while energy prices were 14.7% higher and gasoline was 24.6% higher than 1 year earlier. EIA forecast BLS July CPI. So the evidence supports the existence of a serious capacity problem. It does not prove that America is defenseless, that Iran has achieved strategic victory, or that nuclear escalation is inevitable. The remaining question is what Washington does if these pressures continue.
Question whether you think the fact that we got defeated in the Gulf means that the Chinese will think that we're a paper tiger. And I don't think that's the case. This is not to say that the Chinese think that we are Godzilla and we are unbeatable. But the fact that we lost in Vietnam did not lead the Soviets to think that we were a paper tiger. And I think the same basic logic will apply here. And I think if I'm right and that we do pivot to Asia in a meaningful way, we will build the defenses up and we will make it clear to the Chinese that despite the fact that we lost, that we suffered a humiliating defeat in Iran, in the war against Iran, that they should not think that we are a paper tiger. So that's my sense of what happens here moving forward.
The strongest conclusion from this interview is not that America has already lost its global position. It is that military commitments eventually collide with industrial limits. Mearsheimer appears correct that the United States has consumed a substantial portion of several critical missile inventories. Independent estimates place the Patriot reduction near the percentage he cites, although his claim that 80% of America's THAAD inventory has been expended is not supported by the latest size estimate. The more defensible figure is approximately 38%. He may also be correct that replacing advanced missiles will take years rather than months. Production is increasing, but specialized manufacturing cannot expand at the speed ammunition is consumed during an intense missile war. Where his argument becomes less certain is in converting those shortages into claims of strategic defeat. Military outcomes are not determined by one category of weapon. The United States retains aircraft, submarines, naval forces, global bases, nuclear deterrence, intelligence capabilities, and allied support. Iran's continued ability to impose costs does not automatically mean it has achieved all of its political objectives. The nuclear argument requires even greater caution. Mearsheimer interprets discussion of tactical nuclear weapons as evidence that weakened conventional inventories are changing the deterrence balance. That is a serious interpretation, but the transcript does not provide an official policy document showing that depleted Patriot or Tomahawk inventories directly caused such a change. For Americans, the immediate consequences are more measurable. Disruption around the Strait of Hormuz has already affected global oil flows. Gasoline prices remain substantially higher in July than 1 year earlier, while the government faces new spending demands to replenish weapons. Treasury reported total federal debt approaching $40 trillion in August 2026, meaning additional defense spending enters an already difficult fiscal environment. U.S. Treasury fiscal data. Viewers should now watch for developments: whether the June agreement survives, how quickly shipping through Hormuz normalizes, whether Congress funds the Pentagon's replenishment request, and whether Washington shifts forces from Europe and the Middle East toward the Indo-Pacific. The memorable takeaway is simple. America's greatest risk may not be losing one battle. It may be promising more military protection across the world than its industrial base can replace during simultaneous crises. Do you believe Washington should reduce some overseas commitments or expand production so it can maintain all of them? If you value evidence-based documentaries that separate confirmed facts from political predictions, subscribe for the next analysis.